I never thought betrayal could feel like a shove. But that morning, outside the courthouse, I learned it does. One gentle hand on my shoulder, and then the world tilted. My heels slipped against the marble, and before I could breathe, the flash of cameras swallowed me whole. The air cracked with the sound of shutters snapping. Reporters shouted my name as I fell, arms reaching for nothing but air. My palms scraped the cold stone, my bag spilled open, and my glasses clattered down the steps. The scent of lilac drifted past me, her perfume, Valerie's. When I looked up through the blur of light and noise, she was standing there, perfect as ever in her ivory coat, eyes wide in a performance only the cameras could believe. She gasped, touched her chest, and whispered, "Oh my God," she fell. But I knew what they didn't. I knew who made me fall. People swarmed closer, blocking the sun. Microphones lunged toward me like curious snakes. I could hear their questions, half shouted, half murmured, but none of them made sense. My heart hammered in my ears. I tried to get up, but my knees refused to listen. A young reporter bent down. "Mrs. Miller, are you all right? Did she push you?" Before I could answer, Valerie moved between us, her voice calm and sweet. "Please, she's shaken. It was an accident. The word rolled from her tongue so easily it almost sounded like truth. But then I saw something glint by my hand, something small and silver sliding across the marble. A flash drive. It must have fallen from her purse when she reached for me. I reached toward it, but a guard grabbed my arm, pulling me to my feet. "Let's get you inside, ma'am." They half carried me up the stairs. The marble was cold, the world dizzy. I could hear Valerie behind me, giving statements to the cameras. I tried to catch her. She just slipped. The crowd murmured approval. Sympathy points for her, embarrassment for me. Inside, under fluorescent lights, a security guard offered me water. Valerie knelt beside me, face soft, eyes glistening. "You should rest, Mother." The steps were slick. Her words sounded kind, but her perfume made my stomach twist. I noticed her purse again, closed tight now. No silver flash anywhere in sight. "Where's Ethan?" I asked. "He's working," she said quickly. "He told me to take care of you. Take care." She said it like a promise, but it felt like a warning. Minutes later, the press moved on. My head throbbed. I told the guard I wanted to go home. Valerie insisted on driving. I didn't argue. I just wanted the noise to stop. The ride was silent except for the hum of traffic. I stared out the window, replaying the fall again and again in my mind. The pressure of her hand, the whisper of fabric, the weight of gravity pulling me down. When we reached my house, Valerie helped me inside, fussing like a nurse. "You scared everyone," she said with a nervous laugh. "Tomorrow you'll laugh about it too." I nodded, pretending to believe her. She left after making me promise to call if I felt dizzy. The door closed, and the quiet felt heavier than the fall itself. I turned on the TV to drown it out. The evening news had already made me famous. Elderly woman stumbles outside courthouse. Daughter-in-law rushes to help. The clip played, on repeat. Me falling, her reaching, the cameras flashing. I watched the footage once, then again. On the third replay, I paused it right before I hit the ground. There, just behind her purse strap, a flash of silver caught the light. Too small to notice unless you were looking for it. I leaned closer to the screen. My pulse quickened. It wasn't jewelry. It was rectangular, like a USB drive. I sat back slowly, the news anchor's voice fading into background noise. "Viewers are praising Valerie Miller's quick reflexes," he said. "A tragic but touching moment of family support. That word hurt more than the fall. I turned off the television and let the darkness settle around me. Every joint ached. My pride burned worse. But underneath the humiliation, something new began to flicker. Suspicion, sharp and bright. I knew Valerie had secrets. I just never expected them to fall right at my feet. I walked to my bag and checked the contents. Wallet, glasses, pills, keys, everything neatly folded. Too neat, like someone had repacked it. The USB wasn't there. Maybe she'd picked it up. Maybe she didn't even know she'd dropped it. But deep down, I felt she knew exactly what had slipped out of her purse and exactly how much it could expose. I went to the window. Outside, the streetlights flickered against the glass. Somewhere in the distance, another siren wailed. I thought about those flashing cameras still rolling as she turned away. Maybe one of them had captured more than she wanted. I sank into my armchair, holding my bruised hands together. For the first time in years, I didn't feel old. I felt awake. They saw an old woman fall, I whispered to myself, but not who pushed her. The line echoed in the quiet room, steady and certain. Because deep down, I already knew this story wasn't over, not even close, and the cameras had kept rolling long after she turned away. The next morning, the world already knew my name. The headline on my television read, "Elderly Woman Falls on Courthouse Steps." And right below it, in bold white letters, "Daughter-in-law rushes to save her." The news anchor smiled as he spoke, voice calm and pleasant, like he was describing the weather. But the footage behind him told another story. Me, sprawled across cold marble, papers scattered like leaves, and Valerie's immaculate white coat gleaming beside me. They slowed the fall frame by frame, like my humiliation was something worth studying. I flinched every time I hit the ground again. Over and over, click, click, replay. Valerie's interview followed next. She stood outside her gated home, camera lights soft against her perfect skin. "It was an awful accident," she said gently. "My mother-in-law just lost her footing. I tried to catch her." She dabbed the corner of her eye as if emotion might smudge her makeup. The reporters nodded sympathetically. I sat at my kitchen table, clutching a cup of bitter coffee. My fingers were still stained with yesterday's ink from the newspapers I'd collected off my porch. Every headline said the same thing. Poor old woman, devoted daughter-in-law. My phone rang once that morning. Ethan. His voice was cold, businesslike. "Mom, you should stay off the news for a while. Don't talk to anyone. Valerie's handling it, like I was a problem to be managed." He didn't ask if I was hurt, didn't ask if I was okay. Just silence, then the click of the call ending. I turned the TV back on. The clip played again, slower this time, every detail magnified, every stumble, every flinch. And then I saw it, the same glint of silver I'd noticed last night. It happened in the background, almost invisible, the moment her purse jerked forward and something small slipped free. I pressed pause, leaned closer. It was there, barely a blur. I stepped forward until my reflection blended with the image on the screen. If only the angle had been clearer. I rewound it, frame by frame. Silver. Flash. Gone. Was it the same thing I'd seen with my hand on the marble? Or was my mind making ghosts out of memory? The smell of burnt toast pulled me back. I'd forgotten the bread in the toaster. I dumped it in the sink, poured myself another cup of coffee, and sat back down. The house felt smaller today, like the walls were listening. A knock startled me. It was Hope, my neighbor from across the street. She's in her 70s, sharp as ever, always wearing that floral housecoat like armor. She walked in holding a pot of soup. "Lord, I saw the news," she said, setting it down. "You okay?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "I'll be fine." Hope looked at me, then at the paused screen. "Press love villains," she muttered. "They make 'em look like saints." Her words hung in the air. I followed her gaze to the television again. Valerie's smile frozen mid-frame, soft and perfect, hiding everything cruel underneath. Hope patted my hand. "Don't let her fool you, honey. You've got the kind of memory that scares people." When she left, the house went quiet again. The soup smelled of thyme and comfort, but I couldn't eat. My stomach was tight with shame. Every channel, every headline reminded me of that fall, of how small I'd looked, of how easily she'd fooled them all. I switched off the TV and sat in the stillness. The tick of the clock sounded louder than usual, but then something unexpected stirred under that shame, a pulse of curiosity. What if that tiny flash of silver wasn't just jewelry? The thought struck me like a spark in dry grass. I leaned back, the pieces slowly shifting in my head. The push, the fall, the missing drive. Valerie's nervous smile when she handed back my bag. Maybe that little thing I saw wasn't anything. Maybe it was the truth, trying to crawl its way into the light, and this time, I wouldn't look away. 10 years earlier, the world smelled like roses and champagne. Ethan and Valerie's wedding was the kind you see in glossy magazines. White orchids, gold linens, a band that charged more per song than I made in a week. I remember sitting at the head table, hands clasped, heart bursting with pride. My only son, smiling in a tuxedo that fit him like a dream, and beside him, Valerie, beautiful, confident, her eyes already measuring the room like it belonged to her. That night I signed the first check. $42,000, my entire savings for their down payment. I told myself it was a gift, a blessing from mother to son. Family should help family, I thought. What was money compared to love? The years that followed blurred into a montage of small sacrifices. Extra shifts at the clinic, a second mortgage, just until Ethan gets the promotion. I sold my mother's brooch to help them furnish the nursery that never came. When my cousin passed, I used part of her inheritance to pay off a tax bill Ethan said was urgent. Each time, Valerie would smile, thin, polite, almost rehearsed. "We'll pay you back someday," she'd say, her tone already dismissing the promise. I believed her. Not because I was naive, but because I wanted peace. I wanted to be needed. My late husband had been gone for years, and silence had filled the house like fog. Helping them made that silence bearable. The night of their wedding replayed often in my mind. The clink of glasses, the slow dance under golden light. Valerie leaned in close, whispering something to Ethan that made him laugh. Then she turned to me, her bracelet catching the chandelier's glow, a silver charm bracelet with tiny heart-shaped pendants. The way it shimmered was the same way that USB glinted on the courthouse steps. I didn't realize it then, but that shine would haunt me years later. I kept every receipt from that day. The florist, the bakery, even the seamstress who hemmed my dress at midnight. Proof, perhaps, that I had been there, that I had mattered. People often talk about the strength of mothers. They forget to mention the quiet kind, the strength it takes to swallow your questions, to stay silent when you feel used. Because speaking might drive your child away. Kindness, once taken for weakness, turns to regret. I can still hear the way Valerie's voice changed over time. Softer in public, sharper in private. Her compliments carried edges. "You're such a saint, helping us again. You must be proud." Ethan married someone responsible. Always the same smile. The same subtle tilt of her head that made me feel smaller, slower, unnecessary. There was one evening, years after the wedding, when Ethan came by to borrow again. He didn't sit. He didn't ask how I was. He just handed me a folder and a pen. "It's just paperwork for the refinance," he said. "Valerie says we need your signature." I signed without reading. Because I trusted him. Because I was tired of proving I was still useful. For a while, things were quiet. I convinced myself everything was fine, until small things began to disappear. Documents, statements, even the deed copies from my file cabinet. I assumed I'd misplaced them. I always misplaced things lately, didn't I? That's what Valerie liked to remind me. "Don't worry, Mother," she'd say sweetly. "You're getting older. We'll handle it." Now, in the present, that sentence chills me more than the marble floor ever did. I wish I had spoken up back then. I wish I had asked why their names were suddenly on envelopes addressed to my home, or why Ethan's handwriting looked just a little too familiar on my bank slips. But I stayed quiet, because silence keeps families together, or so I thought. I can still see that charm bracelet flashing across her wrist as she waved to the guests, silver hearts dancing under the lights. Back then I saw beauty. Now I see a warning. The memory fades with the sound of the phone ringing, sharp and sudden, dragging me back to the present. I pick it up. Valerie's voice, honeyed and urgent, fills my ear. "Mother, I need you to bring your property papers tomorrow. The originals. It's for insurance. Nothing to worry about." Her tone is gentle, practiced, the same as it was 10 years ago. And this time, I don't answer right away. "Mom, Valerie just needs to review your documents." Ethan said, standing in my doorway one rainy afternoon. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. His tie was loose, his tone rushed, like he just wanted this over with. He held out his hand, waiting. I went to the cabinet and pulled out a brown folder labeled Mortgage Refinance 2012. Dust puffed into the air as I opened it. Inside were the papers I'd signed years ago when Ethan helped me simplify my payments. I'd trusted him with every line, every signature. "Why does she need these?" I asked. "She's just reviewing them," he said quickly. "Something about insurance updates." I hesitated, then handed him the folder. He kissed my cheek, said he'd bring it back soon, and left before I could ask more questions. Weeks passed. No word, no folder. At first I told myself they probably forgot. Maybe it got buried under other papers. But one morning, as I was sorting my bills, I realized my records didn't match my payments. The amounts looked different. The due dates had changed. I went to the filing cabinet again, searching, shuffling, hoping I'd misfiled the folder. But it was gone, completely gone. The smell of dust filled the room as I emptied every drawer. I found old photos, tax slips, even birthday cards, but not those papers. I decided to visit the bank myself. The teller recognized me and called for the manager, a kind man with gray hair and reading glasses. He printed out my loan summary and handed it across the desk. When I looked at the paper, my heart sank. The balance was higher. Much higher. And next to my name was another, Valerie Miller, co-signer. I frowned. "That's not possible. I never added anyone." The manager looked confused. "According to our records, this refinance was approved 3 months ago." 3 months? I repeated. "I didn't sign anything recently." He turned his screen toward me. "We received an email confirmation with your approval. From your registered address." "My what?" He pointed to the note on the form. "This one, made in Miller Home Outlook." I shook my head. "That's not mine. I don't even own a computer." He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Miller. Everything matches the signatures on file. If you think there's been an error, you'll need to bring your original documents. But of course, those were the very papers that had vanished." I walked out of the bank in a daze. The parking lot swam before my eyes, sunlight flashing off windshields. My hands trembled as I gripped my bag. By the time I reached home, my shock had turned into something heavier, quiet fury. That night, I called Ethan. "Did you or Valerie take my refinance papers?" There was a pause. Then his voice, calm and clipped. "You must have misplaced them, Mom." "I didn't." He sighed. "Look, Valerie said you gave them to her. She was trying to help with your accounts. Maybe you forgot." "I don't forget things like that," I said sharply. "Mom," he said, his tone softening in that rehearsed way he used when he wanted me to drop a subject. "You're stressing yourself out. Valerie's just trying to make sure everything's in order. We'll talk later." Then the line went dead. I sat there in the dark, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. I could almost hear the hiss of the copier in my memory, smell the paper dust. The scratch of my pen years ago when I trusted him to handle things. Now, every sound in the house felt different, like the walls were keeping secrets too. I looked at the phone again, tempted to call back. But what would I say? I think my own family stole from me? Instead, I went to the drawer where I kept my old checkbooks. Inside, I found a note Valerie had left months ago, a reminder to email her receipts for safety. At the time, I'd ignored it. Now I realized it wasn't safety she was after. It was control. I pressed my palm against the counter, breathing slowly. My mind ran through every moment, every conversation. The folder, the missing papers, the fake email address. And then the truth clicked. Valerie hadn't just reviewed my documents. She'd rewritten my life. I whispered it out loud, the words shaking but clear. "That's impossible," I said. "I don't even own a computer." It started with a whisper. That night, the house was quiet, except for the hum of the dishwasher and the soft tick of the kitchen clock. I was washing a single plate when I heard my name, muffled, but clear enough. coming from down the hallway. I dried my hands and froze. Their bedroom door was almost closed, just a sliver of light spilling onto the carpet. I leaned closer, heart thudding. Valerie's voice floated through, sharp and low. "She'll sign anything if you sound patient enough." My breath caught. Ethan's voice followed, quieter. "Don't talk like that. She's my mother." "She's your mother," Valerie said, "but she's forgetful. You said so yourself. We're just helping her manage things before she gets confused again." I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. The words stung worse than any shove. Forgetful, confused. Was that how they saw me now? The dishwasher hummed louder, almost hiding my shaky breath. The smell of citrus cleaner filled the air. My hands were still damp, my palms trembling. Inside the room, Valerie's tone changed. Soft now, sweet. I heard the faint creak of the bed as she sat beside him. "Ethan," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "You know I care about her. But we can't let her make a mistake with the house. We'll keep it safe for her." Control, disguised as care. Ethan didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired. "I just don't want another argument," she sighed softly. "Then let me handle it." A silence followed, heavy, long, and painful. I stepped back slowly, afraid even the floor would betray me. My heart ached not just from anger, but from pity. My son sounded small, lost, like the boy he once was, trying to keep peace between two storms. Only now the storm wore perfume and smiled for the cameras. I went back to the kitchen table, sat down, and stared at the notepad beside the phone. My hand moved before I could stop it. I wrote what I heard, word for word. April 12th, 9:47 p.m. "She'll sign anything if you sound patient enough." I underlined it twice. My handwriting shook, but my mind felt strangely clear. The old me would have ignored it, would have pretended I misheard, would have chosen peace over truth. But that night, something shifted. The same quiet fury that burned at the bank returned, steady and strong. I looked around the kitchen, my home for 30 years. The curtains I'd sewn myself. The clock my husband bought before he passed. I thought about everything I had built, everything I had worked for, and I thought about how easily my own family was planning to take it. When I finally stood up, my legs were weak, but my resolve wasn't. I opened the cabinet, pulled out the small recorder I'd bought years ago to remember grocery lists. It still worked. I placed it in the drawer nearest the hallway, not for revenge, for proof. A soft creak came from the hallway. I quickly sat down, pretending to read a magazine. Valerie appeared in the doorway. Her face was calm, her smile perfectly placed, but her hands trembled slightly. "Oh, you're still up," she said. "I thought you'd gone to bed." "I couldn't sleep," I replied quietly. "Too much on my mind." She crossed the kitchen slowly, holding 2 cups of tea. Steam curled between us. "Then maybe this will help." Her voice was warm, gentle. If I hadn't heard the whispers, I might have believed her. She placed a cup in front of me. The porcelain clinked softly against the table. "You should relax more," she said. "You worry too much about paperwork and money. We're family. You can trust us." I stared at her hand, the same hand that had once pushed me, the same hand that now offered comfort. For a moment, I almost laughed at the irony. She thought she still had control. I picked up the cup and smiled back. "Thank you, Valerie. That's kind of you." Our eyes met. Hers flickered, just for a second. A hint of unease, gone as quickly as it came. She turned toward the hallway. "Good night, Mother." "Good night," I said softly. As she left, I looked down at my notepad, the words still fresh, the ink barely dry. I knew what I'd heard, and I knew this was only the beginning. The tea steamed quietly on the table, untouched, because I couldn't shake one thought from my mind. If she could whisper about me behind closed doors, what else was she planning when I wasn't listening? That night, Valerie offered me tea with trembling hands. After weeks of fear and confusion, I finally decided it was time to stop reacting and start planning. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my notepad. My handwriting still shook, but my thoughts didn't. At the top of the page, I wrote 3 words. Talk to Miles Davenport. Miles had been my late husband's attorney years ago. Honest, quiet, and kind. He'd helped us buy our first house when Ethan was still a boy. If anyone could help me now, it was him. I called his office. Mrs. Miller? His assistant said. He remembers you. Come in tomorrow at 10. The next day, I took the early bus downtown. The morning air was cool, and the city felt louder than I remembered. Miles's office sat in an old brick building with narrow stairs and the faint smell of paper and dust. When I walked in, the scent of leather and ink filled the room. Shelves lined the walls, full of heavy books that looked like they hadn't moved in years. Miles looked up from his desk and smiled gently. Mrs. Miller, he said, standing to shake my hand. It's been too long. I told him everything, slowly, carefully. The missing folder, the fake email, the loan I never signed, and Valerie, always Valerie. He listened without interrupting, his brow furrowing only once when I mentioned the refinance. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. You've done the right thing coming here, he said. We'll start by getting copies of every document connected to your property. We'll also revoke any power of attorney, just in case your son or daughter-in-law used it without consent. His calmness steadied me. He took out a small notepad of his own. We'll notarize the prior deeds, secure new records from the bank, and collect statements. Bring everything you still have, especially originals. I nodded, writing his words down like gospel. For the first time in months, I felt like I was taking control. Before I left, Miles looked me in the eye. I'll help you, he said, but keep this quiet. Don't mention it to your family yet. I won't, I promised. On my way home, I stopped by an electronics store. I bought a small voice recorder and a fresh notebook. The clerk asked if I wanted the warranty. I smiled. No need, I said. I won't be returning it. That night, I labeled an envelope. Proof. Keep safe. Inside, I placed every receipt, note, and copy I could find. I even tucked the small recorder beside it. My plan didn't need noise. It needed silence and patience. A few days later, Valerie stopped by unannounced. She breezed into my kitchen with her usual fake warmth. Hi, Mother, she said cheerfully, setting a box on the table. We got you something. Inside was a shiny new tablet. For your online bills, she said sweetly. It'll make things easier, I smiled politely. That's very thoughtful, dear. She showed me how to turn it on, how to log into the bank, how to tap and swipe. Her nails were perfect, her tone gentle, but I noticed how her eyes watched every move I made. When she left, I sat with the tablet for a long time. The screen glowed softly in the dim kitchen. I didn't trust it, so before I went to bed, I disabled the camera and the microphone. I even wrapped it in a dish towel and set it in the drawer. If she wanted to spy, she'd find nothing but silence. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt something new, something I hadn't felt in years. Calm. Not the quiet of defeat, but the kind that comes before action. I wasn't scared anymore. I was careful. The next morning, I opened my notebook and reviewed my list. Deeds, statements, receipts, all checked. I placed them neatly in a folder labeled Originals and slid it into my bag. At exactly 9:50, I left for my meeting with Miles. When I stepped into his office, sunlight streamed through the blinds, cutting thin lines across the floor. He looked up and smiled. Good, he said, standing. You brought everything? I handed him the folder. Every last page. He nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the first few documents. Then he looked at me. Mrs. Miller, he said, his voice calm but serious. Bring every document again next Monday. All originals. Don't let anyone else touch them. I met his gaze and felt that calmness settle deeper in my chest. Yes, I said softly. Next Monday. The invitation came on a Thursday morning. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and elegant. Ethan's handwriting covered the front in careful loops. Mom, join us. Let's start over. For a moment, I just stared at it. Those 4 words, let's start over, felt heavier than they should. Part of me wanted to believe him. The other part whispered that nothing Valerie touched ever came without a reason. Still, I went. The gala was held at the Grand City Hotel, one of those places where the chandeliers looked like frozen waterfalls and the air smelled faintly of roses and money. A string quartet played near the stage, their music soft and graceful. Laughter echoed from every corner. When I stepped inside, cameras flashed. Valerie turned and spotted me. She smiled, wide, bright, perfect. "Mother!" she called, gliding across the floor in a silk gown that shimmered under the lights. Reporters lifted their cameras, eager to capture the moment. She hugged me tightly, her perfume clouding the air around us. For a second I froze, unsure if it was real or performance. "It means so much that you're here," she said sweetly. "Tonight's about family and forgiveness." The cameras loved it. Ethan stood a few feet away, looking uncomfortable. When our eyes met, he offered a small, stiff smile. I forced one back. An announcer's voice filled the ballroom. "Welcome to the annual Miller Foundation Charity Gala." Applause followed. Valerie waved gracefully, her arm looped through Ethan's, smiling for every photo. I found a seat at a corner table. Silver dishes, crystal glasses, the kind of luxury that made you forget the cost of it all. Valerie moved from group to group, charming every guest like a seasoned politician. Halfway through dinner, she approached my table. A photographer trailed her like a shadow. "Mom," she said, her tone gentle, "can I have a moment?" Before I could respond, she handed me a small velvet box. "For you," she said, "a symbol of new beginnings." The photographer leaned in. I opened the box. Inside was a silver pen, gleaming under the lights. The engraving caught my eye. "Family always wins." I smiled weakly, trying to hide the knot in my stomach. Around us, cameras clicked, catching every flicker of emotion. Valerie crouched beside me, lowering her voice. "I know we've had our differences," she whispered. "But I want to fix things, truly." Her words were soft, almost kind. My eyes blurred with tears. Maybe, just maybe, she meant it. Maybe she was finally ready to make peace. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "It's a small pledge," she said, smiling again. "A symbolic donation in your name to the foundation. It would mean the world if you signed it here, in front of everyone." She placed the document on the table, sliding the silver pen into my hand. For a moment, I hesitated. The paper looked harmless, just one page, crisp and clean. The title was bold and professional-looking. I blinked to clear my eyes. The room shimmered from the chandeliers above. The music swelled. Reporters turned toward us, sensing a photo-worthy moment. Valerie leaned close, her voice a whisper meant only for me. "Sign it, Mother. Let's show everyone we're united again." Her tone was calm, but her eyes told another story, impatience hiding behind the smile. I looked down again. My hand hovered above the page. That's when I saw it. Not the fine print, not the signature line, but the title printed neatly across the top. Property Transfer Agreement. My stomach dropped. The room felt suddenly colder, the lights sharper. I looked up at her. She was still smiling, still holding that perfect practiced pose for the cameras. I forced my lips into a shaky smile of my own, pretending to glance at the paper casually. "It's just a pledge, right?" "Of course," she said softly. "Just a formality." Her hand brushed mine, guiding the pen closer. "Everyone's watching, Mother. Let's not make a scene." The music swelled again. The cameras clicked faster, and for a long moment, I sat there in silence, smiling for the world while my heart raced beneath the sequins of my dress. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think forgiveness was possible, but deep down I knew this wasn't peace. It was a trap wrapped in ribbon and champagne. I set the pen down slowly, the sound faint but final. My smile never faltered. My voice stayed calm. "Let me read it first," I said softly. Valerie's eyes flickered. The first crack in her perfect mask, and as the room shimmered with light and laughter, my fingers pressed lightly on the paper, but didn't move. because right there, in the middle of that golden ballroom, I saw through every illusion she'd built, and my hand froze, hovering just above my own destruction. I didn't sign. Valerie's perfect smile stiffened, just slightly at first. Then her jaw tightened. "Mother," she whispered through her teeth, "you're embarrassing yourself." Around us, the chatter of the ballroom quieted. Reporters noticed the tension, their cameras tilted toward our table like metal vultures scenting drama. The violin music faltered, caught between notes. "I said I'll read it later," I replied softly. Her hand landed on my shoulder, gentle in appearance, but firm in weight. "Please," she said, the corners of her mouth trembling upward for the audience. "Don't make a scene." "I'm not," I said. "I'm just not signing." That single sentence changed the air in the room. Flashes began again, quick, hungry bursts of light. The crowd shifted closer, murmurs swelling like a wave. Valerie's arm slid around me, her grip tightening as she leaned down. "Then we'll talk outside," she said quietly, still smiling for the cameras. Her fingers dug into my shoulder as she steered me toward the exit. The lights grew hotter, the floor brighter. I could feel every stare pressing against my back. We reached the marble steps just outside the ballroom doors. Reporters followed, shouting questions. "Mrs. Miller, is everything all right? Was that a disagreement? Are you signing the pledge?" Valerie kept her smile frozen in place. "Everything's fine," she said sweetly. "Just a misunderstanding." I turned to answer one of the reporters, but before I could speak, she did it again, a sudden shove, not hard enough to throw me outright, but firm enough to send me off balance. The world tilted. The floor vanished. The cameras exploded in white light. Time slowed. I saw faces blur, chandeliers spin, and the edge of the stage rushing toward me. A dozen voices shouted my name. Someone screamed. The sound of my own heartbeat drowned out everything else. Then, impact. Cold marble, gasps. My purse flew open. Its contents scattered across the floor like pieces of my life spilling out for strangers to see. Valerie dropped to her knees beside me, voice sharp with fake panic. "Oh my God! Someone help her!" Hands reached out, cameras kept flashing. Every second felt stretched, strange. Reporters circled like sharks drawn to blood. "Give her space!" A security guard yelled, but no one moved. I blinked against the bright lights, the world still spinning. My palms burned, my knees screamed, but through the blur something caught my eye, a small glint of silver near my hand. It slid a few inches, stopped by the heel of my shoe. I stared at it, breath-catching, the same flash I'd seen once before, the same shine that haunted me since the courthouse, a silver USB drive. Her purse lay open a few feet away, its contents spilling out, lipstick, keys, a folded sheet of paper, and that tiny, undeniable piece of truth. I reached toward it slowly, my fingers trembling. The crowd was too focused on Valerie's performance to notice. She clutched her pearls, eyes wide, mouthing words of horror. "Someone call an ambulance!" she cried. She must have slipped. Reporters moved closer, kneeling, snapping pictures, recording everything. The world buzzed around me like static, and then a voice, calm, steady, right beside me. "Ma'am," a cameraman said softly, pointing to the floor. This was recording. I looked at him, dazed. "What?" He held up his camera, its red light still blinking. "The fall," he said. I caught everything. Valerie froze mid-gesture. Her eyes flickered toward us, just for a heartbeat, but it was enough. I followed her gaze to the USB drive glinting under the lights. My fingers closed around it, slipping it into my palm. The cameras were still rolling, still capturing every flicker of truth and lie. I forced myself to sit up. My voice came out thin but steady. "I'm all right," I said quietly. Valerie's smile twitched. She wanted me silent, broken, and confused. But I wasn't, not anymore. The security guard helped me to my feet. My knees shook, but I stayed upright. I could still feel the weight of the drive in my hand, cool and solid, the tiniest piece of justice waiting to be heard. Behind me, flashes erupted again. Reporters shouted questions I didn't answer. Valerie backed away, still clutching her pearls, her mask slipping ever so slightly. The air smelled of perfume and fear. I looked at her once more and whispered, "You should be careful, Valerie. The truth has a way of showing up when the cameras are still rolling." Her face went pale, and somewhere inside that glittering chaos, I realized the fall hadn't broken me. It had exposed her. Because this time someone had caught everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of Valerie's face, the panic behind her smile, kept looping in my mind. I sat in the dark, the silver USB drive resting on the table beside my cup of cold tea. It looked so small, so harmless, but something inside me knew it held more truth than anyone wanted to see. At midnight, I took a deep breath and plugged it into my old desktop computer. The screen flickered to life, the fan humming softly. Outside, rain tapped against the window like a whisper. A single folder appeared. Charity Gala Funds 2021. My hand trembled as I clicked it open. Inside were dozens of files, spreadsheets, letters, and scanned documents. I scrolled slowly, heart pounding harder with every new name I saw. There were payment records, charity ledgers, lists of donors. And then I saw something that made me stop breathing. My own name, Margaret Miller, donation approval. I clicked it. A form opened on the screen with my signature neatly printed at the bottom. The same looping letters, the same pressure strokes. Only one problem, I never signed it. The room suddenly felt colder. I opened another document. Then another. Each one was worse than the last. Forged signatures, fake accounts, transfers I'd never seen before. The faint hum of the fan mixed with the sound of rain outside. My heart beat so loudly it drowned everything else. Then something strange happened. I clicked on a file that refused to open. A small box popped up on the screen. Encrypted. Password required. I tried again. Same message. There were at least 5 encrypted files. Videos, by the look of their icons. My stomach twisted. I didn't know what to do with them, but I knew who would. Miles. I took out my phone, attached the unencrypted files, and typed a message. Found this on the drive. Sending now. Please be careful. Then I hit send. For a few minutes, I just sat there staring at the glowing screen. My reflection looked older, sharper somehow. There was fear in my chest, yes, but right beside it, a pulse of something stronger. Power. For months, I had felt invisible, silenced. But now I had proof. Something real, something solid. I went back to the folder, scrolling slowly through the list. Near the bottom, I saw several video files labeled only with numbers. Curiosity 1. I clicked one. The screen filled with an image. Valerie standing in front of a mirror, practicing her speech. At first, her voice was calm and charming. "We're honored to help the community," she said with that same perfect smile. Then her tone shifted. No, that sounds fake," she muttered, lowering her voice. "Make it sound real, Valerie. They'll believe you if you cry on the last line." I froze. She kept rehearsing, adjusting her tone, pretending to tear up. The camera angle was strange, like she didn't realize she was recording herself. I clicked on another file. Same thing. Different outfit. Different location. More rehearsals. My throat went dry. These weren't donation appeals. They were performances, proof that everything she presented to the world was a lie. I copied the videos onto my computer, labeling the folder Evidence in bold letters. My hand shook as I typed. The sound of the keyboard echoed through the small room. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Miles. "Miles, got the files. Reviewing now. Miles, if these are real, it's huge." Another pause. Then, "Miles, some are encrypted. I'll have a tech expert unlock them by morning." I stared at the screen, unable to move. The rain outside had turned steady, soft but relentless. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. "Miles, we have enough for court. Do you trust me?" I read it twice, the words glowing blue in the dark. My reflection shimmered faintly on the glass of the monitor, the woman staring back at me looking both fragile and fierce. For a long time, I didn't type anything. Then slowly I replied, "Me. Yes, I do now." I leaned back in my chair, letting the hum of the computer and the patter of rain fill the silence. Because for the first time in years, I felt it again, control. And as I looked at the screen, at the folder still open before me, I knew the truth had finally found its way into my hands. Case number 2381B, Miller versus Miller. The words echoed through the courtroom like thunder. In a church, I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands folded tightly in my lap. The scent of coffee mixed with old wood and the faint tang of metal from the brass rail in front of me. Across the room sat Ethan and Valerie. He wouldn't meet my eyes. She, on the other hand, stared straight ahead, her face calm, perfect, unreadable. She wore a navy suit this time, sharp, pressed, expensive, not a wrinkle in sight. When the judge entered, the sound of his gavel filled the room, crisp and final. All rise. We stood. My knees ached, but I held myself tall. As we sat again, Valerie whispered something to her lawyer, a sleek man in a gray suit with a voice too smooth to trust. He rose immediately. "Your Honor," he began, "we move to dismiss this case. The so-called evidence against my client was obtained illegally. It cannot be used." He smiled faintly, like someone confident the fight was already won. Miles, sitting beside me, didn't move. He waited until the room quieted, then stood calmly. "Your Honor," he said, "the evidence was not stolen. It was found, dropped in a public place. We have verified timestamps, witness statements, and chain of custody." The judge glanced over his glasses. "And the contents of this evidence?" Miles picked up the silver USB drive from the table, holding it carefully between his fingers. "They speak for themselves." He walked toward the bench, the small object gleaming under the lights. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Even the sound of papers rustling stopped. Valerie's lawyer started again. "Objection, Your Honor. This is an invasion of privacy." "Overruled," the judge said sharply. "Let's see it." Miles nodded to the clerk, who connected the USB to the screen at the front of the courtroom. I could hear the faint hum of the projector as the lights dimmed. The folder appeared. Charity Gala Funds 2021. Valerie's hand twitched. It was small, but I saw it. Miles clicked the first file. Numbers filled the screen. Donations, transfers, falsified ledgers. Then came the forged signatures, my name printed neatly at the bottom of documents I'd never seen. The judge's eyebrows drew together. "These are substantial," he said. Valerie's lawyer leaned forward, whispering rapidly to her. She didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed locked on the screen. Miles clicked another file. This one was a video. For a second, nothing. Just static. Then, her. Valerie stood in front of a mirror, her phone propped against a vase, rehearsing. "We're honored to support this charity," she said in a practiced voice. Then she sighed, dropped the smile, and muttered, "No, that sounds fake. Again." A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Miles clicked another video. Valerie again. Different dress, same performance. "Smile softer this time," she said to herself, adjusting her necklace. "Cry on the last line." A journalist in the back gasped. Cameras shifted. Valerie's lawyer jumped up. "These are taken out of context." The judge raised a hand. "Sit down, counselor." Miles spoke softly. "Your Honor, these videos are time-stamped the night before the gala. They match exactly with the donations that disappeared afterward." The judge leaned back, silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Proceed." I looked toward Ethan. He stared down at the table, his face pale. His hands trembled slightly. For the first time in years, he looked young again. Not in age, but in guilt. Valerie shifted in her seat, her smile gone now. Her fingers tapped against the table, nervous, rhythmless. Miles loaded one more clip. The room fell completely silent. On the screen, Valerie's voice played again, this time laughing softly. "Of course I'll get her to sign. She trusts me more than anyone. That house is as good as ours." I felt my breath leave me. The judge reached forward and paused the video. The frozen frame filled the screen, Valerie mid-laugh, her expression careless, confident. Caught? No one spoke. Even the air seemed to stop moving. The judge's gavel came down. Sharp as a heartbeat. "We'll reconvene tomorrow," he said. "Court is adjourned." The room erupted into whispers. Cameras flashed again, brighter than before. I stayed seated, my hands steady on the table. Miles leaned toward me and whispered, "We're getting close." I nodded slowly, watching Valerie gather her papers with shaking hands. Her lawyer spoke to her in hushed tones, but she didn't answer. For the first time since this began, she looked smaller than me, and as the crowd buzzed around us, the frozen frame of her laughing face still glowed on the screen. Her own performance turned into proof. The judge leaned forward and rewound the footage. The room fell silent. Every journalist, every spectator, held their breath as the projector hummed softly. The faint scent of cologne and polished wood filled the air. Valerie's face flickered back onto the screen. Her voice, clear and confident, echoed through the courtroom. "Make sure she signs. She's old, she won't notice." Gasps rippled across the benches. Cameras clicked. My son's face drained of color, his eyes frozen on the screen. Valerie shot to her feet. "That's a deep fake!" she cried. "Someone edited that!" Miles didn't move. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "our IT expert verified the file. The metadata and timestamps confirm it's authentic." The judge looked toward the technician sitting near the stand. The man nodded once. "Completely genuine, sir." The courtroom buzzed like a shaken hive. Valerie's lawyer sank back into his chair. Ethan covered his face with his hands. I sat perfectly still, the weight of the wooden bench pressing against my palms, the hum of the projector steady in the background. Then the judge turned to me, his voice low but firm. "Mrs. Miller," he said, "do you wish to address the court?" I stood, my knees trembling but steady enough to hold me upright. For a moment, I just looked around the courtroom, the judge, the lawyers, the cameras waiting for another headline. Then I spoke, my voice quiet but clear. "I raised them to tell the truth," I said. "I expect the same now." The words echoed louder than I expected. I told the court everything, how trust had blinded me, how kindness was used as a tool, how silence became my own undoing. Each word came easier than the last. The shame that once lived in my throat melted into something else, steadiness, then strength. Halfway through, Ethan broke. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry." He couldn't look at me. Valerie sat beside him, her perfect mask shattered, tears streaking her makeup. But it was too late. The judge nodded slowly, then spoke. "Restitution is granted. All forged loans are void. Property restored to Mrs. Miller." The sound of the gavel struck like freedom. Reporters rushed forward as I turned to leave. One leaned close, voice low and curious. "Ma'am," he asked, "how did you find that drive?" I smiled faintly. "It found me," I said, and kept walking. Sunlight slanted through my kitchen blinds the next morning, painting soft lines across the counter. For the first time in months, the house felt quiet, not heavy, just peaceful. I brewed a pot of coffee, the smell filling the air, and poured 1 cup for myself. 1 cup was enough now. The phone rang. It was Miles. "Everything's finalized," he said. "The settlement funds have cleared, and the deed is back in your name." I closed my eyes and let out a slow breath. Not joy, not triumph, just relief, the kind that seeps deep into your bones. I looked around my little kitchen, at the same clock ticking on the wall, the same table where I once signed things I didn't understand. Now every inch of it was mine again. A soft buzz broke the silence. My phone lit up with a message from Ethan. "Mom, can we talk?" For a moment, I just stared at the words. My heart ached, but not in the old way. This time, I understood the power of distance. I typed slowly, each word steady and true. Maybe someday, but not yet. Then I set the phone down and let the sunlight fill the room. I enrolled in an evening art class downtown. The building was old brick with tall windows and a creaky elevator that moved like it had stories of its own. Inside, the studio smelled of paint and turpentine. Soft music played from a small speaker, and strangers laughed as they found their seats. No one knew me here. No one looked at me like a headline. I could just be a woman with a clean sheet of paper and an hour to try again. Our instructor, a cheerful woman named Nora, clapped her hands. "Watercolor night," she said, smiling. "We start with light. We add shadows later." I liked that. Light first. I chose a place near the window. The sky outside held the last gold of evening. My hands trembled as I taped down the paper, then I lifted the brush. The first wash of blue slid across the page like calm water. It felt simple and brave at the same time. "Beautiful start," Nora said as she passed behind me. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. Around me the class began to hum. Brushes tapped jar rims. Someone giggled at a splatter. The music blended with the murmur of conversation. I listened without joining in. My world narrowed to paper, water, and color. Stroke by stroke, I painted. A memory. Morning light on my kitchen table, the curve of a mug, the soft shadow of blinds across the surface. Nothing dramatic, just quiet, like I wanted my life to be. By the end of the hour, I had something small and honest. Not perfect, but mine. "Bring your favorites next week," Nora said. "We're setting up a little wall sale, nothing fancy. 5x7s, 10x8s. Price what feels fair." Fair. The word felt new in my mouth. I came back the next Thursday with 2 small pieces in a folder. One was the kitchen still life. The other was a simple scene of the city bridge at dusk, cool blues and a ribbon of warm orange. I pinned them to the cordboard with my name under each, M. Miller. I didn't expect anything. I just liked seeing them up there, catching the light. People drifted in and out, talking and pointing. Someone poured plastic cups of lemonade. A teenager, in a denim jacket, stopped in front of my bridge painting and tilted her head. "I love this," she said. "It feels calm." I smiled. "Thank you." "Is it really $30? She asked. "That's all?" I swallowed. "Yes, that's all." "I'll take it." She handed me a few bills and I slid the painting into a clear sleeve for her. My hands shook as I wrote "sold" on a sticky note and pressed it under the pin. I felt a small pop inside my chest, like a bubble of joy breaking the surface. Later that evening, a man in a tweed cap pointed at the kitchen still life. "Is that yours too?" "It is." "I'll give you 50. I hesitated, then nodded. He counted out the money carefully. When he left with the painting tucked under his arm, I stood there alone with $80 in my pocket and a feeling I hadn't known in years, joy without permission. No one had to approve it. No one had to sign anything. It was just mine, my choice, my hands, my work. On the bus ride home, I watched the city slide by in glowing windows and streetlights. I thought about how many times I'd waited for someone to tell me I was allowed to be happy. Tonight, I didn't wait. At home, I set the money in a small dish by the door and made tea. The house felt lighter. I walked room to room without that old ache. The deed in the file cabinet, the new lock on the mailbox, the quiet of my kitchen, they were all small, steady wins. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Local fundraiser tied to multi-state fraud ring under investigation. I didn't have to read far. Valerie's name sat in the second paragraph like a cold stone. I set the phone down on the counter and let the steam from my cup warm my face. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just breathed out, long and slow. Justice had started in a courtroom. Now it was traveling on its own legs. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. A couple strolled past holding hands. A neighbor's porch light flicked on. Somewhere a dog barked and then settled. I lifted my sketchbook and drew the shape of the window frame, the curve of the curtain, the glow on the glass. Simple lines, soft shadows, light first. When the kettle clicked as it cooled, I turned the phone over again. Another alert, another name, another state. The investigation was bigger than I'd known, bigger than me. I traced the rim of my mug with one finger and pictured the silver USB, the way it had glinted near my hand like a coin tossed back by the tide. Proof doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers and waits. I carried my tea to the table and opened a fresh page. The brush felt steady in my fingers. I painted a single lilac bloom, pale and bright, floating in white space. Not a memorial. A marker. I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in peace that lasts. The clock in the hall ticked softly. I cleaned my brush, folded the dish towel, and turned off the kitchen light. In the doorway, I paused and looked back at the tulle, page drying on the table, the small lilac, the open white around it. Maybe justice never ends. It just changes hands. I stood at the same courthouse steps exactly 1 year later. The marble felt warmer now, touched by sunlight instead of flashbulbs. The air was quiet, calm, no shouting reporters, no staged smiles. Just the faint hum of city life moving on. I bent down and placed a single lilac where I had fallen. The petals brushed the stone like forgiveness laid to rest. For a long moment, I stood there and let the memories drift past, the shove, the humiliation, the long climb back to truth. None of it felt heavy anymore. It felt finished. My voice, if anyone had heard it, would have carried only gratitude, not grief. Kindness without boundaries invites theft, I whispered, but with wisdom it becomes strength. That was the lesson the fall had given me. I didn't lose my dignity that day. I reclaimed it, slowly, quietly, one truth at a time. I looked toward the street where the crowd moved like a living river. Faces I'd never know, stories I'd never hear. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, blending into the motion. The camera flash from a passing tourist flickered for a second, then faded into sunlight. I walked into the crowd, unseen yet completely free. If this story touched your heart, share it. Someone out there might need to hear that it's never too late to stand up, speak out, and start again. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time for another story where truth finds its V.